Okay, I'm sure I'm not the first person who has told you that correlation is not the same thing as causation, but I'm going to probably be the one who belabors it the most for you, and this is going to be a running theme for you if you stay in psychology, because like I said, a lot of our research is based on correlational data, and so we in particular as a field have to be super cautious about inferring too much meaning from correlation results. Okay, so let's use an example to get into this. How do we know that correlation does not equal causation? Let's spend a moment talking about the Good News Survey. It was an actual survey that was conducted in 1986, and they got over 3,000 people to respond to this mailed out survey that asked all sorts of wide-ranging questions about what they ate for breakfast when they were kids, whether they took vitamin pills when they were kids, did they ever smoke, I mean all sorts of lifestyle things, and then health outcome things like had you ever had cancer and things like that. And then they just did a bunch of correlations on the results. Okay, so one of the first things that they discovered is that those people who reported that they ate Frosted Flakes when they were kids reported that they had lower cancer rates than people who reported having eaten oatmeal when they were kids. Okay, I like to use this particular example from the Good News Survey because it should have your little skepticism spidey senses alerted. You should be going, something has to be wrong. Because I think we're all pretty sure that Frosted Flakes does not protect us from cancer. And that Quaker Oats, it does actually help remove cholesterol. It's right there on the label. And you know that they're not allowed to put stuff like that on labels unless they can back it up, right? Now, helping lower cholesterol is not the same thing as protecting us from cancer, but, you know, all the fiber in it and stuff, I mean, come on. It's got to be better for us than Frosted Flakes. So hopefully you're already thinking skeptical thoughts. Now, because we're not in class, I can't do a, you know, live action, what do you guys think kind of question. And what I usually do is poll the students. And a lot of times I get responses back like, well, some people make their oatmeal with water and other, you know, everybody eats their Frosted Flakes with milk. So maybe it's the milk. Maybe milk helps to protect from cancer. Other people say things like maybe the sugar that people put on top of the Quaker Oats has carcinogens in it, and the sugar that's on the Frosted Flakes isn't the same kind of sugar, and so it doesn't, maybe it's been refined or something, it doesn't have the same carcinogens in it. I mean, things like that. People will say things about the ancillary components of the cereals. Now, I don't think there's any validity to anything that having to do with any of that. I don't know about you guys. I make my Quaker Oats with milk, so I don't think presents, and a lot of people pour milk on their Quaker Oats and then eat it like that. So I don't think those are probably the best explanations. I am pretty confident that Frosted Flakes does not protect us from cancer. So what's left? Well, what we want to think about is other possible interpretations. It's good that my students went off and thought about things like the milk or, you know, carcinogens that might accidentally be in the Quaker Oats. Some people have offered, for example, that because they aren't they haven't been processed and stripped of stuff, maybe they're carrying with them pesticides and things into the food. That's great that they're thinking like that. That's perfect. That's what you should always do when you hear about a correlation. The first thing you should think about is what else could explain why these two variables are going together. If I mention that Frosted Flakes were first introduced in 1951, maybe that'll help get you on the right track for what I think is probably the best explanation of the correlation. If Frosted Flakes have only been around since 1951 and the Good News Survey was conducted in 1986, the oldest people who could have eaten Frosted Flakes as children were 35, right? I don't know, maybe they could have been 50 if they were still eating Frosted Flakes when they were 15 years old and called themselves children. That means by definition there is a demographic difference between the people who were able to eat Frosted Flakes as children and people who had to eat Quaker Oats as children, right? There weren't Frosted Flakes available. So it's possible that the relationship between cancer rates is really relating to age of the respondent, not to what they ate as children. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, still sticking with the good news survey. People who reported having taken vitamin pills when they were children were more likely to report having used illicit drugs when they were young adults or teenagers. Okay, let's think about this one for a second. It's possible that taking vitamins when you're a child makes you use illicit drugs when you're older. It's possible. But remember that the theme of this lecture is correlation does not allow us to conclude causation. So let's think outside the box. Some of my students have offered the idea that maybe starting to take pills when you're a kid makes you more open-minded to chemicals, or maybe it makes you think that things like marijuana is basically healthy because it's just another herb like the vitamins you've been taking your whole life, things like that. That's good. Think about things that are a third, something else that could explain the relationship. That's great. You should be doing that. What about the fact that vitamin pills were introduced in the 40s? And again, remember the Good News Survey was conducted in 1986. So kids who were children in the 40s were probably young adults in the 60s and into the 70s. And what are the 60s and 70s famous for but illicit drug use? Right? So possibly, again, it's age. If you were the critical right age to have been a child when vitamin pills were introduced, you are more likely to have been one of those children who grew up to be a child of the 60s or the 70s where drug use was more common. So it could purely be a function of age again. I'm stuck in a rut. All my examples have to do with age. What I'm raising here is the issue of the third variable problem. Sometimes people refer to this as a spurious correlation. That's what Lisa Simpson called it when her dad Homer tried to assert that the reason why there were no bears coming into Springfield anymore is because he had introduced Citizens Patrol to keep the bears away. When in fact what had happened is the climate had gone back to normal, the drought was over, and so the bears went back into the hills, and so it had nothing to do with his Citizens Patrol keeping the bears away. And so when he said, well, look, my Citizens Patrol really is working, Lisa said, well, that's a spurious correlation. That's like saying that because this rock is here, that's why there are no tigers in town. And he's all, I'd like to buy that rock from you. Of course, there's no protective mechanism in Frosted Flakes preventing cancer. Probably it's a spurious correlation. Probably it's just like the Citizen Patrol or the tiger repelling rock. It has nothing to do with the outcome. There's probably some third variable that accounts for the outcome. I'm going to give you another example which was near and dear to my heart at one point, because I was reading, okay, so just to set you up, I had at this time I had like a 2-year-old child and then a 5-year-old child. And so anybody who's had children knows sometimes it can be kind of hard to lose your baby weight and then you feel kind of bad about yourself. So I'm just saying. So I'm reading Psychology Today, which I read every month just to get the little blurb, see what's going on in my field that is not in my area. And there was a little blurb that reported a study that showed that women who weighed more than 10% above their ideal weight earned 10% less money per year than their ideal weight female counterparts. So we're just comparing females to females. Women who were slightly overweight earned less money than women who were ideal weight or less. So of course I'm sitting there in my postpartum baby condition going, oh no. But then I read on, and this is where it gets really tricky. Maybe I'll give you a visual, even though I hadn't prepared this visual. I'll show it to you here in my little Word document. Okay. Sometimes I have to write on the chalkboard, right? So we've got ideal weight women. I'm going to go women. And then we've got overweight. And we've got ideal weight. And I'm actually going to go here. And I'm going to go less money than their ideal weight counterpart. Okay, so that's women. Now, if we compare that to, so of course, like I said, I kind of was sad when I read this and thought, oh no, right? Till I read on. When they looked at men, the men who were overweight earned more money than the men who were their ideal weight. Now, the researchers tried to interpret the results as being evidence of sexism, that women who were overweight were still being held to that, no matter what their field was or whatever, they were being held to a standard that had more to do with their looks than with their competence, and a whole bunch of interpretations like that. But I couldn't get over this men thing. Okay, if that's true, why are overweight men earning more than ideal weight men? Shouldn't they just be earning the same amount, and they should be earning more than women in general, and the ideal weight women more than the overweight women? I mean, shouldn't there have been some kind of equality between the men? Because weight shouldn't have mattered. We aren't judging men by their figures like we are women. So that got my little research mind going, and I got to thinking, why is it different for the two sexes? And again, I don't mean to be redundant all the time, but I came up with a third variable of age. One of the things we know about humans is that in our adult life, from age 18 on, we tend to gain, on average, 1 pound per year. On average. Now, we don't all do it. But that's the typical pattern. So if you're 18 and you're your ideal weight, by the time you're 40, you've probably put on 20 pounds on average compared to your 18-year-old self. So I started to think maybe these guys, I'll highlight the people who are probably older, right? The overweight men and the overweight women are probably the older members of the cohort. So then I started to think, why would older women earn less than younger women, whereas older men earn more than younger men? And then that got me to thinking about male versus female issues with regard to continuity of employment and other factors that can go into women earning less as they get older compared to men earning more as they get older. I went into the literature and discovered that women, if you compare men and women who have just graduated from college, so we're talking about people who are within usually about 5 years of each other in age, everything else being the same, we have the same level of education and things like that, on average, women in that condition earn 1 penny per hour more than men do. So women have a slight advantage, or they're equal to their peers when they first enter the job market. It isn't until they've had kids and taken some time off and made choices about part-time work and other kinds of things that suddenly we realize that women aren't making as much as men. Okay, so see my little logic? I started to think age is what's causing these people to be overweight. Age is what's causing these people to actually earn less than these people, because the ideal weight women are probably younger and are probably newer into the workforce and haven't made a lot of their reproductive life choices that are going to affect their careers. Overweight men, on the other hand, have been steadily working in their field and have been growing in status over that time, whereas the ideal weight men are the ones who are more likely who just entered the field. So these are the kinds of thoughts that need to go through your mind whenever you hear about a correlation. You have to always wonder to yourself, is there another explanation? That's what we mean by correlation does not prove causation, and you always need to be careful. Okay, so I'm going to stop this here and I will come back and continue this chapter.